Welcome back to another episode of the Good Question podcast by CoinScheduleTV.
Hello everyone. Today's episode features Jana Petkanic, an Amsterdam-based blockchain consultant and microfinancing pioneer. Jana is heavily focused on blockchain technology within the context of microfinancing and specifically peer-to-peer lending. She's particularly interested in platforms such as ethichub.com. Her focus at the moment is to utilize these new crypto-based financial instruments to drastically improve the access to loans for developing world farmers and entrepreneurs. I really enjoyed this conversation as microfinancing was somewhat of a blind spot for me, but now I feel like I have a much better understanding of this emerging industry and its revolutionary possibilities. Don't forget to like and share this episode and subscribe to our channel. I hope you enjoy. How did you originally get into cryptocurrencies and blockchain? And when was that?
Long story short, I think I've been having a pretty dynamic relationship with Bitcoin space. So in 2012, a friend of mine, he showed me how he's mining Bitcoin. And I was like, wow, this doesn't make any sense in long term. So I thought, it might be something which is here for a few weeks and then it will disappear, much like Pokemon or whatever the hype you can think of, But then in 2014, I heard of the Bitcoin again because of the Mt. Gox. But honestly, I wasn't able to understand what could be the potential of Bitcoin besides payments. And I wasn't much interested in fintech back then. And then 2016, this is where my story started. So I came across it for the third time in my life, and I decided, okay, so this is the third time, and I need to understand it now, So I sat down and I was like reading and studying. And then, I believe that once you enter it and understand what it's all about, you will never leave,
Yeah.
And also, the more you understand, the more you like it. And because, at least for me, it's like the more I'm exploring, the more I'm convinced about the potential for the future.
Yeah, and how did you get involved once you'd started to understand how it worked? Like, what was that process?
Well, I started as a standard blockchain enthusiast, like reading articles, maybe engaging a bit on forums. And then in April 2017, I moved from my country, from Slovakia to Amsterdam. And I was exploring how's the job market over there as it comes to blockchain space. And it was pretty good. Mostly they were looking for blockchain developers, which was none of my interest to be a developer again. So I was looking more into consultancy opportunities. And I found one, and it went really good. I stayed with the company for 7 months. I was really enjoying. But then when you work for a company who is delivering blockchain products, and it's not within the Bitcoin space, for instance, but it's more in Hyperledger space,
Sure, yeah.
Then you might have a conflict with your inner values, as it comes to blockchain.
Yeah, and how did you go from all of that to microfinancing and microloans?
I've been always looking into, where is my place within blockchain space? Because I think it's pretty comparable to internet. You cannot say you are internet consultant. And I was like blockchain consultant. But I still was thinking, okay, where is my scope? Where is my place in this industry? And I was much into supply chains. But I understood that, supply chains, in the first place, is pretty complex to implement any blockchain. And secondly, it doesn't change much on a bigger scale. We can talk about this later, but to answer your question, I came then across microfinancing because I'm hosting blockchain talks. It's a monthly event in Amsterdam about blockchain and cryptocurrencies. And I was hosting one interesting project called EthichHub in our events, and we are hosting them in ICO Shark Tank. It means you have a committee of 4 judges who are stepping in with any question they might like, and it can get pretty tough, pretty hot. But those guys, they were able to defend, whatever the question was, they were able to answer in a very reasonable way. And this is like where my interest was triggered, that, wow, this is interesting, the project looks very like interesting, people are genuine. So I checked what they are about, and all of a sudden I found my passion, I found like my place in the space.
Which was microfinancing and microloans.
Microfinancing, peer-to-peer lending, yeah, with a focus on emerging economies.
So can you just briefly explain what microloans and microfinancing actually is?
Okay, well, few disclaimers. It's not a charity, it's not donation-like system. This is very important because many people think, okay, peer-to-peer lending platforms for social impact, because the platform I mentioned, Ethic Hub, is for social impact. Many people confuse it for charity, and this is something it is not about. So microfinancing is a general term which describes the transfer of value of small amounts across the world. So it's like cross-border payments. But the point is that it can get pretty expensive to send someone across the world 100 euros, for instance. But with blockchain-based applications, we can do that. Because, well, I don't have to explain like how much you will spend on banking fees when sending someone 100 euros to Kenya, for instance. But the blockchain-based solution, it can be instant, the settlement is instant, and it can take not 2 weeks, but it can take up to 10 minutes, for instance, ideally. So, and then I would say like the subcategory of microfinancing is peer-to-peer lending. So it's a specific application of microfinancing. When you, as a person living in a developed world, have the opportunity to lend out your 100 euros, for instance, to someone in emerging economies. And so far, I'm not saying it wasn't possible, but it didn't make any sense from economical perspective. Because if you would be interested to lend out your money of that amount, 100 or 1,000 euros, to someone, banking fees, administration, auditing, and keeping track on it can make then the interest rate over the loan for the person up to 100 or 200%. So it really doesn't make sense. But now with blockchain-based solutions, we have the opportunity, to really like lend out money to someone who can then benefit from lower interest rates than what they have locally. And then you can benefit when they pay you back, you can benefit from higher return on investment. Whereas when you have money in a savings bank account, then in Europe, I don't know how much you can get. It's like 0.5%, 1% a year. Because banks, they don't care that you are storing your money with them, because there is abundance of money in general in Europe. So they are not creating incentives for you to give your money to them. So when you lend out your money works for someone. Your money is invested, and then you get your money back with some way more interesting return on investment. And this is the most crucial point of peer-to-peer lending, which is blockchain-based, because we can go borderless, We don't have to think, okay, I want to lend someone here around the corner. I can lend someone money to, I don't know, Argentina, Brazil, whoever, And this is something which wasn't possible before blockchain.
So, just out of curiosity, if you're lending money into the third world from, for example, where I am now, Oxford in England, how could I ensure that my money will be repaid and not just taken off the blockchain and then never repaid to me? And what insurance policy is in place?
I strongly recommend to use platforms which are having KYC standards, for instance, such as a platform which was mentioned at Ethic Hub. When you lend money through existing platform, you might pay commission to the platform, but the commission can be like 1%. But it can ensure that, you know the customer, you know what the default rate is, you know what is the process in case the person doesn't pay back. Because there are different kind of approaches. So some platforms, they promise, okay, you can insure. So you lend your money and you put something on top as an insurance to decrease the risk. Then you have platforms which are having a reserve fund. So in case loan is not paid back by the borrower, then you get paid back from a reserve fund as a lender.
Cool.
Or there are platforms which are using collaterals. So when borrower doesn't pay you back, then you get at least the collateral. And it's also very interesting world, because now with cryptocurrencies, if you think of stable coins like the DAI stablecoin, it's collateralized by Ethereum. So basically we can think of similar approach in peer-to-peer lending. So even unbanked people who are in emerging economies and they don't have any data to build credit score upon, we can maybe create a system where cryptocurrency will serve as a collateral. So in case they don't pay back, you will still get the cryptocurrency back. But it's something to think about for the future, because currently the microfinancing platforms which are operating in a peer-to-peer way with a social impact aspect, they don't have that.
How optimized are these platforms at the moment? Are they still in their MVP stages, or are they nearly optimized?
Here it's very important to say that we shall not confuse lending platforms with peer-to-peer lending platforms, because you have a lot of existing platforms which are only for lending. So they have like one pool of assets, and you as a person, you can go there, you can borrow some money, you put some collateral in, and you can enjoy the money, and then you can pay back when the time expires, right? So this is like centralized solution. But then peer-to-peer lending platform is actually you are lending money to someone, preferably in a peer-to-peer way, or in a way that you are lending out to community, like of farmers or whoever. And you ask if it's MVP stage. So the first one, lending platforms, they are already very solid. So I wouldn't say it's MVP. They have like many users. And then the other kind, peer-to-peer lending, it's a new field at first place, and the second, everyone in the crypto space currently struggles a bit with user base and with growing the user base, because the interest in crypto decreased a bit over a year time, but it doesn't mean that, excuse me?
More than a bit.
I'm always trying to be optimistic.
Yeah, me too, but sometimes reality slaps you in the face.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, so I was saying that the peer-to-peer lending platforms, they are mostly in MVP stage, because it's very difficult to reach the critical mass of users on the borrowers and lender side. So you really achieve peer-to-peer structure, So, but I mean, we are getting there with integrating fiat payment gateways where people, they will not have to have anything about crypto, but they will be able to use the platform. So, but it's happening. So in a year time, I think we'll be seeing more blockchain-based peer-to-peer lending platforms with fiat payment gateways.
So yeah, this all sounds very promising, because obviously we understand in the crypto community the premise and the problems caused by economic exclusion and financial exclusion, and this is obviously a way to circumvent that system and how long it takes a legacy system to move out of the developed world into developing in the third world. Question I have is, which use cases and which industries do you see this most disrupting, most affecting most obviously?
As it comes to peer-to-peer lending, I would say agriculture will come as first, because supporting small entrepreneurs in emerging economies makes for both sides, for lenders and borrowers, way more sense than those farmers getting some money from banks and paying back the interest rates, which are insane. Because I'm not sure if you know how cash flow at the global level works when we involve IMF and World Bank. And
not that well, if I'm honest. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, long story short, so on a bigger scale, what's happening now, emerging economies are borrowing money at state level. So for instance, Argentina borrowed money from IMF August last year, and I think it was something like $58 billion. The IMF was like, well, Argentina, I mean, you already have a huge national debt, but you know what, here's the money. And you pay us back sometimes. But they know very well, like, how they can, how to explain, IMF knows that Argentina won't be able to pay the money back, but they have other benefits from Argentina, which they can sort of get the money back indirectly. So like Argentina is a huge market, South America is a huge market. So imagine having some cartel, so like few companies gathering together saying that we are interested in those markets. Could you please like open up, and Argentina would be saying, no, we don't want these products here because of, some regulation, whatever, or preference. And IMF could be like, but then what do we do about your loan, So maybe it sounds a bit paranoid, but I strongly recommend reading a book, Bad Samaritans. And this explains it very well, what is happening on a bigger scale. So back to peer-to-peer lending platforms. Imagine like being a farmer somewhere in Argentina and asking your bank for a loan. Bank has the money from National Bank, which has the money from sort of the government, from the IMF. Mm-hmm. And then the farmer, he might get an access to loan, but as a result, he gets some money, like small amounts, with high interest rates. In Argentina, even banks are giving 60% interest rates over loans.
Oh wow!
So when you think how different this is from Europe, and with peer-to-peer lending platform, we can actually support that farmer who is interested in money. Who is interested in money in a way that I have some, let's say, 5,000 euros in my bank account, and I want to support someone. I want to earn more money from what I get from the savings bank account. And yes, so I use peer-to-peer lending platform. I put my 5,000 euros in. Obviously, first I do the due diligence on the platform. I check what is the default rate. I check what are the risks associated. And then I lend my money, obviously.
So you mentioned agriculture and that you think that that's going to be important. What level of adoption has the agricultural sector had with peer-to-peer lending so far?
This is a very difficult question. I mentioned agriculture and smallholders, so small entrepreneurs, as a first target group because it's the easiest as it comes to diversifying your risk. I mean, it's the easiest, but currently, as it comes to peer-to-peer lending, I don't dare to say any number, any figure, but for Ethic Hub, for our platform, we are having 60 borrowers, so 60 Mexican farmers.
And they come back every cycle of the agricultural harvest?
Yeah, exactly. So in this case, they are harvesting coffee, and coffee has 6 months harvest cycle.
So they come back.
So basically, when you lend your money, you get your payment back in half a year. Okay,
and how is that different from the timescale that the banks would give loans and demand back repayments? Like, what's the difference between the crypto peer-to-peer and the conventional banking?
The major difference here is the rate farmers can get declined, because a bank is looking at, the most convenient when you want to evaluate credit score is to look at the data. When you have a farmer who has no data, you just decline, Whatever he's asking for, he can ask for $1,000, he can ask for $2,000, but you are going to decline because he just has no history. So with peer-to-peer lending platforms, we are able, as mentioned, to create sort of collateralized frameworks. So farmer will have the opportunity to borrow the money, no matter that he doesn't have any data. Because it's very important to understand in general that banks, they are expensive services. And we as Europeans, or developed world in general, can afford to pay the fees for having a bank account, for whatever the fees you can think of, we can still afford to pay. Because your salary is, whatever, but you can still afford to pay this amount. But imagine someone with a salary of $100 a month. How he is going to pay even the money for having the bank account? So it's important to understand that banks are by default legacy systems. Innovation takes long time, and it's questionable if we will see any innovation in this space, any major. And hence, its legacy system is expensive. For them, throwing some financial services into that unbanked and unexplored environment is just too expensive, and it's very risky. So I don't think they will ever be looking into this market. I mean, obviously they are looking into and they're exploring, how to reach those clients potentially. But for them, when they see the data, like some data, as I mentioned, like the salaries somewhere in Southeast Asia or whatever, it's just not an interesting market. So therefore, peer-to-peer lending platforms, they are not going to disrupt banks in that areas. They are going to provide new solutions, new opportunities for entrepreneurs. So I wouldn't see peer-to-peer lending platforms as a competition, not at all.
Well, at least not.
I would say we are exploring blue ocean markets with peer-to-peer lending platforms.
Right. But then one day, maybe a few years down the line, once adoption within the agricultural societies and within the entrepreneurial community, once that market's been captured, surely there is a potential to disrupt conventional banking lending systems.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think, market forces, obviously. People always follow the best option for them, right? So when they see, okay, here is the loan, here's some lending service, here is lending service. One is peer-to-peer, one is bank. Peer-to-peer offers me 25% interest rate. Bank offers me 60% interest rate. So where do I go? Obviously, I go to peer-to-peer lending. So we might see this happening, but here very important is to understand that regulation is tied to the government. So hypothetically, when adoption is too high, then the government might not like it, because central banks, they are tied to government, and central banks, they are tied to banks. So they might not like it. So in some countries, we can see pretty much the same situation as in Venezuela, where they banned crypto exchanges, which were centralized. But this doesn't mean that we shall not be trying, Because at some point, I think, you still have the inflection point where things get too much, and then they just explore, and you have the network effect. So people will just go for it, and it will just be too big to fail, sort of. But the point is, to reach that inflection point.
Yeah, that critical threshold of adoption.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that was actually my next question. Is surely the biggest barrier to entry for these markets to evolve and to be adopted is the awareness of cryptocurrencies and the awareness of what they are, how they work on a technical level, and how they may one day be able to deliver economic freedom to so many people around the world. Do you see that as your biggest obstacle, or do you go straight in with the peer-to-peer lending and then explain cryptocurrencies after?
Here, what we are striving for is to remove the cryptocurrencies from user experience journey. So when the borrower has access to website and he wants to borrow the money, the cryptocurrencies and blockchain will be somewhere in the backend. So this is what we are striving for. Right. Because we are very aware that educating the end user might take decades.
Yeah.
Okay. And we will never be able to rely on, I don't want to be bad, but the literacy rate in those countries is not as high as in Europe, And you cannot tell that person, here is your private key, in case you lose it, you are done,
Yeah.
This is not what we can afford, so we are very aware that we shall be striving for user interface, a user experience, which is a sort of cryptocurrency free, and the cryptocurrencies are somewhere in the backend, because they're still a very crucial feature. So I would say that, yes, understanding cryptocurrencies is an obstacle at the moment, but for us to develop the technical solution, it can take 6 months or 4 months. And educating a user base, it can take 20 years, So obviously we go for the 4 months option. So this, and for the rest, we struggle a bit with lenders, and here is the paradox. We struggle with lenders because whoever I speak to, and I tell them, look, you lend your money to our Mexican farmers, they pay you back, and you get 15% return on investment in a year time. Like standards, like financial people, they are, wow, this is a scam, because it just sounds too good to be true. And I mean, I fully understand. When you don't understand what it is all about and what we are actually leveraging, then obviously you are going to say this is a scam. Mm-hmm. So currently, I mean, we have 8,000 farmers on the borrower side, which potentially could be in our network. But we only have 60 actually borrowing the money because we don't have any lenders. I mean, we have some, obviously. But still, we need to think, how do we get the message across lenders so we don't discourage them, so they understand that yes, this is possible, that yes, this is not a scam, and yes, this is why it works or why it can work.
And how are you attracting in lenders? Do you have some kind of advertisement campaigns in the Western world?
Yes, I mean, we started to work January last year. Started to work on ICO. So January last year, we did all the PR, all the promo, with an idea to have ICO in September 2018. But in September 2018, the situation in the markets wasn't very good. So we just postponed the ICO, and yes, now it's very questionable if we are going to have any ICO anytime soon. But how we are attracting lenders? So first of all, we are aiming for people who understand cryptocurrency, so they can pick up, why it works just like this. So this is our first target group. There we are having some conversion rate. But in long term, we are thinking of, on the lender side, of issuing standard financial instrument like bonds. So bonds are something which is pretty much understood by many people who come from standard finance, and they might not care, like what is the rest of the story, that the money goes to some farmer in Mexico and then he pays back, People look, here is the bond, what are the conditions, what is the repayment, and these kind of things. So this is our strategy for this year.
So would that bond be traded on conventional financial markets?
This is also a question to be discussed. We are not clear on this. But yes, I mean, we are aiming to, we understood that achieving peer-to-peer is a long journey. And, the addressable market on the borrower side is huge, Even in our network, as mentioned, we have 8,000 borrowers. It makes $8 million in loan, because on the average, our borrowers need 1,000 for half a year. And then we have got many contacts who are asking to roll out our platform to their regions with borrowers, like in Indonesia, in South America. So I think we will not struggle on the borrower side. But on the lender side, we are thinking of maybe going more standard way, because we need to cover the loans. So, but this is something, as mentioned, we are still discussing, and we are very open for help from anyone who might think that they know the solution for this problem. We are very open for this, because we spoke to bankers, we spoke to insurance companies as well, we spoke to people who are having funds, and each of them, they have their perspective, right? But we need to find what is the best and most sustainable way in long term for us.
Yeah, I imagine it's quite a hard obstacle to overcome, because you're also, not only is the market taking a downturn, but the people who would take up this peer-to-peer lending on the lender side would obviously be interested in cryptocurrencies, which means that you're competing for their money compared to every other crypto project.
Yeah, potentially. But as mentioned, when we put blockchain cryptocurrencies into backend, so lenders, they as well. They might not need to know that there is some blockchain involved,
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I just imagine for the first few people anyway, I imagine it would be peer-to-peer fanatics that come from the cryptocurrency community.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. And where do you think that this will be 5 years from today? Like realistically, where would you like it to be? And then ideally, where would you like it to be?
Okay, realistically, if we fix the problem with lenders, so if we'll come up with some more understandable financial instrument on the lender side, then in 5 years, I see like facilitating microloans for, let's say, 1 million user base. Because 1 million, I mean, some people can say, well, 1 million is a lot of people, but we are pretty much clear on how do we go about credit score, how do we scale. So this is not of an issue. And then ideally, I would like to see this growing also in a way that we'll go to the next stage, which is, I mean, here very important thing is, imagine you have a peer-to-peer lending platform. You are lending your money to some coffee grower, and you like the coffee. And the supply chain is more or less already connected because you are lending him money in a peer-to-peer way. So in 5 years, ideally, I would like to see like shortened, more peer-to-peer like supply chains. Because I'll be lending my money to some banana producer in South America because let's say I like bananas, And then he'll be like, well, I'll pay you my loan back, but here is my harvest. Are you interested? And then we just negotiate the price, and then he just exports the goods, So this is, I mean, okay, it sounds like, wow, we are going to break down the huge supply chains into small micro supply chains. But I don't see any issue with this. Even now you go to Amazon, you go to eBay, and you buy some case for your mobile phone for $5, and the one case is being shipped for you from China or whatever the place is to Europe, But you are using the big supply chain of Amazon, for instance. So why not to enable an access in this peer-to-peer way directly between consumer and producer? When you really like some like agricultural product, coffee, chocolate, whatever you can think of, why not to, okay, you lend your money, the farmer like delivers the harvest, and then you can enjoy the harvest. So in 5 years, ideally, I would like to see this even on a smaller scale, but it would be great to see this happening.
Yeah, wow. Well, yeah, I think it makes total sense that you could disintermediate so many of the steps down the supply chain.
Yeah, because here very important is to say that producers in emerging economies are those who are actually putting 80 up to 90% of a value, here not talking about the price, but of a value of the product into supply chains. But as a result, like when you look at the price and how the price and the price breakdown, so you pay for your cappuccino like €4, but the producer actually gets maybe, I don't know, let's say 15 cents. I'm not saying that he should be paid, that you pay €4 and he should be paid €3, right? But at least, mitigate the huge difference. At least mitigate the inequality at the beginning and at the end of the supply chains. And we can achieve that with the peer-to-peer, or starting with the peer-to-peer lending, and then finishing with maybe those micro supply chains, sort of.
Yeah, you're right, because when every person in the step of the supply chain takes their own cut, which obviously inflates the price of the final product and decreases the amount of value that can be extracted by the original producer. And you spoke already about the problem with lenders, that there's not enough lenders. What other problems do you see this space facing over the next few years?
As mentioned, when we grow enough, then regulation might be a bottleneck. Because I might sound pretty like against politics, but here politics and regulation can intervene in a way which serves in the end like corporates, or it's very important to observe what is happening at a bigger scale. And why do we have the regulation we have? I mean, on a smaller scale, have a look at Venezuela. Why centralized exchanges are banned? Because government banned them. And why did they ban them? Because there was a potential threat that people will hop on cryptocurrencies right away because it was just convenient to use. They are now finding ways. I mean, there are still solutions like OTC platforms like Eldorado, for instance. And there are still some ways, but first important thing is to have a look. Who is in, no, let me rephrase it. Like, in case you are delivering any kind of cryptocurrency service to some country, is this in conflict with someone's interest? And if yes, then if you grow enough, will this person be able to shut you down? If yes, then they will do that for sure, And if they are like somehow related to government, then obviously they will do that. So in next years, I mean, all platforms, cryptocurrency platforms, especially focused on emerging economies, they might face regulation because, yes, no one wants to end up in jail, obviously. But it's important to understand that regulators, they're also people who are complying to interests of some entities, right? Either state or European Union or something. So, I mean, this is what I see as an issue, and this is what I see that we have to be a bit careful about, or at least keep this in mind.
Yeah, and I did an interview 2 weeks ago with the head of Ethinex, which is pioneering decentralized exchanges, and how decentralized exchanges can be the antidote to the repression of crypto exchanges. Do you see decentralized peer-to-peer lending platforms playing a role in the space in the future?
Yes, definitely. I mean, honestly, I've been thinking of this about this a lot. So my response to this would be yes, decentralized peer-to-peer lending platforms. This is also what we are striving for with our platform, with the Ethic Hub. We want to become distributed as soon as possible. But anyways, here the problem with decentralized whatever peer-to-peer lending or exchanges or other crypto services is that making a link to fiat currency can be a problem. Because on decentralized exchanges, you usually don't have fiat currencies because, well, you don't have KYC. And, so important is to think of when you have decentralized service, how are you going to create some OTC-like platform next to it in order to facilitate the fiat money supply into the platform? So, yes, I mean, we'll see the more aggressive the governments will be in emerging economies towards platforms, we will see more decentralized solutions. But important is to keep in mind that link to fiat is still very important because cryptocurrency adoption is still not there yet, Cryptocurrency adoption, even, in Venezuela, some people might be actually using it. But in general, cryptocurrencies are currently only a mean of exchange, sort of like that I send you my bitcoins, but when you want to spend them, you preferably cash them out, So you only very rarely can spend your bitcoin somewhere in your neighborhood.
And how far away do you think the level of adoption that is required for a cryptocurrency integrated system is within these emerging societies?
Honestly, as long as like essential needs of people are covered, then we are fine. When you can buy your bread with bitcoins or whatever, then of course it's great, But I cannot say. I mean, I suggest you check out Eldorado in Venezuela. It's an initiative by Guillermo Goncalves, and it's very interesting. Like they are having very good overview on what is the adoption like and which steps need to be taken in order to achieve this or that in long term. It's very difficult, to say, okay, let's encourage all the bakers in Venezuela to accept Bitcoins. Because, bakery products are essential products. It's really, we need to maybe gamify it in those countries,
Gamify it? What do you mean by that?
Gamify, to come up with some easy and understandable framework for merchants to follow and to enjoy it, and not to have any hassle with government, with accounting, with whatever, Like, ideally, here is the 2-pager, here is some mobile app, you do this, you just follow like the steps listed here. And yes, you are covered. You are covered as it comes to accounting, taxes, whatever you can think of. Because merchants, they usually now struggle with that they might be interested in accepting cryptocurrencies, but they are just like, it's extra effort for them to look into, okay, what do I have to do in my accounting when I want to accept Bitcoins, What do I have to do in my tax, whatever, It's just like, I suggest like coming up even with some manual or with some really game-like system, so the bakers will be like fighting, like who will be the first and who will be like having more Bitcoins, more revenue in Bitcoins, in a month and this kind of stuff. This can be fun to see, in long term.
Yeah, you're right. That could be what accelerates adoption, I guess, having some kind of gamified system. Yeah, it's just hard to figure out what that system will be and what it will look like and how to develop it. I suppose that's the job of those of us in the community at the moment, to come up with these plans and implement them. Yeah, great. Well, this is a super interesting topic. I'm going to go do some more research into it after this, because I think there is a lot of potential with microfinancing to help aid the parts of the world that have been left out of the conventional financial institutions and have been unbanked for forever. And I think it's a very noble thing that you guys are doing.
Sorry, I cannot hear you now well.
You can't hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can. Yes, but it's interrupting.
Oh, okay. Right. Well, I think let's end it there anyway, Jana. It's interrupting. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that all right? We'll end it there. Have you got anything else to say? Any message you want to spread?
I would like to invite everyone to check out peer-to-peer lending platforms such as EthicHub. And if you feel like helping us, supporting us in any way, like we need maybe to help with lenders, then reach out. And also what I'm very interested in is data. So I heard that there are some platforms which are rewarding you when you collect the data, some data in some countries. So imagine, like, you want to know how many people are actually using smartphones in Peru or in Chile. And you have platforms which reward you when you collect the data. So I'm not sure if anyone has heard of something like this, but I heard there are some, and I would love to hear more, because data of internet penetration and smartphone penetration is a starting point of any cryptocurrency adoption. So it's very important to have them. So should someone have an idea how to collect those data, then reach out, please.
Okay, so anyone listening or watching who's got access to this data, please reach Jana and let her know how to access it. Thank you very much for coming on today, and good luck with your talk later on.
Thanks for having me. It was nice being here, and all the best. Have a nice day.
Yeah, you too. Take care. Bye.
Thanks for watching.